Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Game Audio Hour, a fortnightly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here is where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. I'm looking around. Let's go in reverse, in counterclockwise order, as our way of celebrating falling back from daylight savings time to standard time, at least here in the U.S. Alex, how are you doing? You're not in the U.S.
Hello, I'm good. Sorry, I have another screen over here. I was just getting the Twitch and the YouTube up here, and we're all good now. I'm quite fine. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing great. I kind of wish that I was a little bit better. Certainly a cup of tea or coffee would do it. Mike, you don't have a problem with that, though.
I always keep a good source of caffeine on standby just in case the show, hits a little bit of a lull and I need some help to stay alert.
With all of us here, you need more help to stay alert? I mean, you've got Chase right there. Chase!
That's true.
Yes, I bring the energy.
Oh, man.
I'm glad we're all back on together. It makes me happy.
I love it. I think it's great. It's been a while since all of us have been here together. It's always been a little bit piecemeal, especially with all the events that have been happening over the fall. GameSoundCon wasn't that far back. Those interesting digital networking events happening over the summer. But hey, it is now the four of us, and we're looking to make a great show out of it, aren't we? Yes, it's going to be great. So I figure, why not just get right into it? Alex, you actually posted some questions earlier that were actually from some of the people that have actually been in the chat previously, as well as from some of the events that we have seen. Some questions that are, they're good questions here. And I'm not sure if maybe each of us individually has the right answer for any of these questions, but I think maybe together we can do a pretty good job of it. So let's go right to it.
Yeah. So I was watching one of the lectures on the GameSoundCon, which was very good, actually. GameSoundCon. GameSound, as you might remember, if you attended, you could watch the lecture here, and there was like a Q&A box along the side where viewers could kind of add in their questions as the talk was going on. And one of the lectures that I checked out was kind of like an introduction to the industry and to the field of game audio for people who had recently graduated or considering it as a career. And some of the questions that came up in the Q&A section, obviously by people who are new to the field, I thought were really, really interesting. And some of them, like you just mentioned, Vince, I don't know that we have all the answers, but it might be interesting just to go around the room, metaphorically speaking, and just sort of compare notes on what we think, how we would answer some of these questions. So some of them are fairly short and easy, and some of them are fairly meaty and difficult. So why don't we rip right into it? So the first question here: is it possible to work as a game audio professional if you are not living in a big city or country? So I guess by big city or country, I suppose it means a country that maybe is not so, that doesn't have such a hot scene for game development, I suppose. Essentially, do you have to be physically located where the action is? I guess is a way to rephrase the question. Mike, what do you think about that?
I don't think it's necessary, but it certainly helps. But I'll start with the first aspect of that. Game audio, I think, lends itself to distributed work collaborations, perhaps more so than film and TV. Film and TV is a more traditional form of media, an older one that has its roots more in a break your bread in person with your collaborators kind of tradition. Game audio is by nature more high tech, so there's probably more tolerance of Zoom workflows. And of course, that's never been more true than in 2020. I think there is some advantage to living in it's hard to generalize, but large country, large city, a area that is proximate to game development because it's nice to be able to show up and meet your potential collaborators. I think psychologically, if a game producer is going to work with a new composer, they would love to meet them in person if they can. I do not think it's a deal breaker if you can't, but I think you do have an advantage if you can say, when there isn't a pandemic, hey, why don't we come over and grab lunch and I'll tell you about my feelings on game music. You may have that opportunity to bond. There's also an advantage to living in a city with a body of professional musicians if you're going to work with live players. I think living in LA or London or Nashville or some other city that's got a really vibrant performance tradition and modern recording studios, that's always a big plus as well. But it shouldn't scare you if you don't live in a big city or big country or game development front country. Just be aware of the advantages of doing so.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I think that the answer to this one can basically be broken up into two periods. Are we talking now, or are we talking this time last year? and the answer is a little bit different. And I think obviously the answer now is that yes, it's absolutely possible to work as a game audio professional if you're not living in a big city or country. This is actually a question that's very relevant to me, especially sitting here talking to three guys who live in Los Angeles, because I come from a very, very small, well, not very, very small, a relatively small town in Australia, which does not have a very hot game industry community, game development community, I should say. And when you come from a place like that, you always have this feeling that the grass is greener on the other side, and that, if I could just go to Hollywood or London or Paris or Tokyo or Stockholm or one of these kind of hotbeds of activity, then all of the opportunities will be there for me. I don't know. I think for me personally, I would say that yes, it's absolutely possible to be a game audio professional now, anywhere in the world. But unfortunately, this time last year, when social gathering and networking was much more viable, my answer would have been that it's just quite a lot easier if you have easy access to big networking events. And when you don't, because you live somewhere more remote or with less of a game development community, things still happen, but you just have to try a little harder. You have to work a little harder at it, hustle harder, I suppose. So, yeah, I know it's a tough one. Nowadays, the scene is quite different. And I think we haven't, actually, I'm interested in your view on this, Chase, actually, but we haven't really found a new normal for business networking in this current sort of environment. Like, we have all these events and we have, online chat channels as part of these events, like in GameSoundCon and stuff like that. And they even had Old Space VR as well as a place for people to network. But I don't know that there's yet sort of a new normal for how we're supposed to network in this remote world. What do you think, Chase? Have you come across any sort of common reoccurring patterns in the way that events are encouraging people to network these days?
Yeah, honestly, it's just been a bunch of join my Discords and attend these events. And that's pretty much the kind of gamut that's been circulating. I'm not sure about what the normal will be necessarily. I do believe and I do foresee a hybrid happening for people who are kind of relating to the first question, not being able to network in person, so that there's, when these events, if they come to pass, being in person again soon, they're still involved with being online and still being able to interact with one another, such as maybe a Discord hangout or a virtual meetup of some sorts or of another. And I think that's actually pretty cool because personally for me, I don't really like to leave the house. So if I could choose to kind of be there virtually, and then people, maybe they'll have like a laptop there and they're like, hey, well, Chase is actually here virtually, and everybody else who maybe, and you and Alex and you there, and he's like, they can walk up to be like, hey, how's it going? And then everybody else will be in person, and then maybe you have another virtual room. I don't know. That might be something further down the road, or maybe not.
Yeah, let's hope so, because that was always it's always the most frustrating thing for me. Like GDC, for example. I mean, GDC is an expensive event, but then you double that cost because for the plane ticket to get there from across the world, and it's like, yeah, you know. Let's go on to the next question. This is a specific question I think Vince is very well qualified to answer. So I'm curious to hear his take on this one. The question is it possible to make a living only out of video game music composition? Do you see a promising future for composers in the video game industry? So I suppose that is, for those who are unsure, that is video game music composition as opposed to sound effects design, audio implementation, technical audio engineer, those sort of other aspects of game audio. So is it possible to make a living as a music composer in game audio only, and does it have a promising future? Vince.
I mean, I think it's possible. Certainly from my position, it's possible. And I do know other people that do similarly. They are only in video games and they are only in music. It is a little more difficult, I think, just because of what people do ask for. There are a lot of people, especially in the indie space, especially those with lower budgets, that are looking for people that can have a diverse skill set that they can use over the course of their project. There's that uncertainty. Hey, not just uncertainty of how their project is, but uncertainty of your involvement. So, hey, we've got a musician. How can we effectively use this musician is one of the things that they're thinking. Are we wasting money and time by employing this musician? And, oh, wait, he's not just a musician. He's also a sound designer. That's great. And then that relieves them a bit. So that's certainly a plus there when it comes to doing other aspects of video game audio. When you first brought up this question, I was actually thinking about it from the video game perspective, as in, is it possible to make a living only doing video game music and not branding yourself as just a media composer? And I think that's actually possible too, just because there are many things that are very specific to video games that you need to show a virtuosity with. Interactive music, for example, the timeliness of music within particular game structures, even if it's not necessarily interactive, but being able to use music in a way that is really easily understood by people that work in video game parlance and not movies and not TVs. You know, they don't care about, is this I don't know, real naming for how you actually deliver your cues. You know, they're just like, oh, I want these wave files. But they, on the other hand, they do care about the specifics of video game implementation. This is a battle theme. This is going to be the bridge in changing the level of intensity of the battle. And there's some very specific things that are happening there that I think, yes, you can be focus solely on video games and make it work out.
Mike, as a multi-award winning composer, kind of timely there, because you have recently won an award recently, correct?
Last week, yes.
Just last week, just another one for the shelf, you know. Go on, tell us what the award was, Mike. Come on.
Well, it was outside of game audio. It was for a feature film score called Lady Usher, which is a kind of a modern macabre spin on Poe's Fall of the House of Usher. And we did a score primarily with a string quartet. And when you've got a live ensemble, I think your score has a leg up in some ways over other entries at the same competition. So in this case, we won Best Original Score at the New York Cinematography Awards, which, despite its name, is actually much broader than cinematography. So
Fantastic.
Thank you kindly. But yeah, I will refer to it as an award-winning score forever in my blog and casual conversation.
Much congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Likewise.
Well deserved. Do you when you look at across your, I guess your portfolio and I guess your prospects as well, and generally as you run a business as a composer, how do you view the balance between video game, like game audio, game music, and non-game music, and for example, other aspects of audio design that we have, such as sound effects design and implementation and stuff like that? Do you view it as being essential as an independent composer to be balancing a wide range of these kinds of things and not limiting yourself to one field?
I enjoy that very much. I think artistically it offers a lot of breadth. I regard film music and game music as related and overlapping, but distinct disciplines. So the focus is very different. Film music is often about obsessing over the details and the relationship of music with a very specific set of visuals. Whereas game music, you're often looking for an approach, a system that's going to handle any number of spontaneously generated interactive stories. And you don't have that specificity unless you're doing a cutscene or something that's traditional. So it's nice I like exercising my brain in different ways, and it's nice to go back and forth between those two media for the variety artistically and technically that gives you. And if you get fed up with one kind of gig, there's another kind of gig waiting around the corner to provide some relief and then appreciation of everything you didn't appreciate about the first gig.
What would your advice be to somebody who came up to you and said, I just absolutely love video games and I love video game music. I live and breathe video game music and it's all I want to do. Would you say to them that go for it? Or would you say, well, that's maybe you're making itself a little bit more difficult, making it a bit more difficult for yourself by sort of limiting yourself to the one field? Would you recommend that somebody be more diverse in their composition activities?
I think it's important to harness your motivations and passions because that will result in your best work. So in particular, if somebody's coming out of college and they just want to do game music, there is no harm and potentially a lot of good for saying just dive into the thing you love. That said, breadth is always useful, and I would say at least familiarize yourself with some of the canonical film scores, understand the differences and similarities between film music and game music. You may one day be able to segue from one medium to another, and wouldn't it be nice to have thought about some of the problems in traditional media? Or perhaps if you're talking with a game developer, it might be useful to refer to film music paradigms a little bit, or to talk more of a story standpoint. Depending on the game, some game developers may really like that. The other direction is interesting, though, because game music is so more technical in some ways than film music and TV music, linear media. There's all this stuff you have to learn, and more than just learn, you have to have a firsthand intuition from gameplay in order to really be an effective game composer. So if someone were coming out of a background of studying and interested in scoring linear media, I would say just familiarize yourself firsthand with the medium, because it's not a direct application of what you know in film and TV music. There really is some new stuff to learn here, and learn about the technologies and learn about the specific problems in game music.
Cool. The next question, we're moving on here, has Chase written all over it. So I'm just going to read it and send it straight over to Chase. How can I start promoting myself, especially on Instagram, so I can start to grow a networking and get people to see my work? Chase.
I don't know.
You say you don't know, but you're certainly doing something.
It's funny because I was actually off Instagram for years until 3 years ago, and I even asked someone else I felt was doing it better on Instagram than I was for help. And his name is Akash Thakar, and what Akash told me was that you need to just be putting the content that you create from game jams and your other portfolio work that you kind of may have up there every day. And the biggest thing that I've also seen in that, rather than just saying, hey, look at me, is being cognizant of reciprocating feedback. So you probably want to follow some game developers, and a lot of game developers on Instagram are posting up their artwork and their designs and their progress. And you may want to comment on that stuff, because that's, I think, the give and take that you can offer. And if they see your work, then they might like it and you become fans of each other's work. I think organically, what would possibly happen is you'll end up collaborating and possibly working on that project together at some point in time.
What's your view on the balance between Instagram and Twitter? Because I see that over the past maybe year or year and a half, Instagram has sort of risen up in popularity and relevance in the game industry and game audio, especially also for musicians in general, and even, you know, critically right now too. But previously, and you know, Twitter really was sort of the de facto social media platform for the game development field. What's your view now at the moment on the balance between these two? Do you see a decline in Twitter and an increase in Instagram, or it's just Instagram coming up alongside next to Twitter?
I actually do see a drastic difference over the past 5 months. Twitter is still heavily used by game developers, posting screenshot Saturdays and other hashtags to promote their games and their work. And that's typically what I found that is popular amongst that scene. But what I have seen on Twitter is a lot of filtering of other topics and non-focus mediums transferring into that, meaning maybe some political views, maybe some things that are not interesting to others, happens through retweets and likes and such. And so the Twitter algorithm is showing things on your feed you may not want to be interested in that regard. And that's what was so cool about Twitter, is that you could easily get on and get off because who you followed had that specific thing based off of what they tweeted, not what they were retweeting or what they were liking and such. So your feed is getting a little clustered and not really formatted in that design. So Instagram is still kind of a little bit of more direct. This is what I posted, not what I liked, unless you're looking at stories or reels, but it's still more of like, this is my daily day-to-day, and this is what, and then it's just more customized and straightforward. And again, if you're following developers, as long as they're posting some of those things that are consistent based off of their work, then it will be consistent to follow what that development process is like in that cycle. But between the two, I noticed that if I post on Instagram, I actually get a lot more traction rather than Twitter now. It just depends, I guess, on when you're posting, what time, usually that kind of does things like that. But your network seems to be a little bit more refined in Instagram now, because the people who want to follow you on Instagram follow you because they want to see what you're doing, not just what your thoughts are on Twitter and what you may have and not liked and retweeted.
As a platform that's designed for basically snapping photos and sharing the photos with, you know, your followers, it seems like a very unlikely choice for game audio, doesn't it? Or for musicians in general.
Ever since they've introduced IGTV, Reels, and just like the videos just in general, I think it's become more of a boosting platform overall for game audio, because you can actually show your work of how you're doing, which is everything, right? To be hired, you're trying to build trust by someone who hasn't met you in person. So if they're seeing a video, it's a little bit more organic, and it feels and it's the consistency is there. It's like, okay, well, this person knows what they're doing. I'm seeing them record sound. I'm seeing them play saxophone in their room studio, which doesn't look like it changed because they rented it out for a day. So I think that's kind of helping the transition and the formality to be a little bit more seamless.
Cool. Let's go to the next question. Let's ask Vince. Would freelance be a great way to start a career, or would aiming for an employed role have more positive impact in an early career? So basically, when you've just graduated, would you recommend trying to go freelance or trying to find aiming for an employed role as being a better strategic step for a long-term career in game audio?
Wow.
Vince?
Man, I'm not totally sure on this, because I mean, I could see either way, freelance or employed, working out. I mean, it really is more about you know, being able to leverage whatever relationships you get And if that relationship results in something where you're doing a contract gig, that's great. If it results in an employed position, that's great too. Um, I got to admit, I have a bit of bias just because starting out my career, it was really bad for me being freelance. It was actually extremely tough. And so, I did have this image in my head of what I wanted to do. I wanted to actually be able to have a couple of different clients that I was working with, a couple of different projects, being able to do different things and, maybe even vastly different things in terms of aesthetics and goals and whatnot. It didn't end up that way. And actually, the very beginning of my career, I found myself attached at the hip with a couple of different companies. Sometimes it was big companies like Konami, big company, pretty decent job. I was working in game audio, which was great. Not necessarily the highest profile projects because these were mobile games prior to the iPhone hitting the market. So you can imagine what were the games I was working on. It was, it's this new version of Frogger for this new version of a Nokia phone, because we got to make sure it works there. It wasn't the most exciting work, but it was this consistent work that I had because I had a salary. It was great. And I was very much working with that and living with that for about a decade. I was attached at the hip to different companies. Instead of Konami, it became that game company. Instead of that game company, it became Reverge Labs, and so on and so on. And it really wasn't until recently that I got, right now I'm actually doing a decent job of doing the freelance thing. I've got 4 gigs right now that I'm working on actively. But, freelance versus employed, I think I was able to survive at the beginning just because I was able to lean in and leverage those relationships that I was establishing and maintaining early on in my career. And it started even before I got out of college. Hey, here are these college buddies. Hey, here are these friends that I met on this video game forum. And that helped me a lot in getting the audio director position at Reverge. Things like that. Freelance, employed. Yeah, I'm not sure that that's really as meaningful a distinction there as the questioner might think.
Mike, what's your view on this as a long-time freelancer yourself?
Well, the early part of my career was also a stressful freelance stint. And then I was in-house at a game company for 5 years, relatively early in my career. So I have a little bit of perspective on this, which is perhaps subject to the vagaries of time that has passed since then. I think if I put myself in the mindset of somebody early in their career who's coming out of college, I think some of the top priorities are convincing themselves that this isn't a pipe dream, that they actually can make money doing this, that they're not just frittering away their education. And if there's an opportunity to work as an employee in something related to game audio or game music or the areas that you're specifically interested in, even if it's in a kind of ancillary capacity, it's probably very valuable. There's something tremendously good for morale about being paid for the first time in a field that you're interested in. And once that's happened, you have this confidence and bearing that you can take with you into the freelance world. So financial stability has both emotional and real economic benefits. On a more subtle level, I think it's good to get a glimpse of the level of the industry above which you could reach on your own, just to see how things are done. So even if you're a small fish in a big pond, if you're in a music department and maybe you're just doing audio implementation work when you'd rather be composing, you're still in that environment. You're seeing how the companies interact with their clients. You might have access to gear and resources and musicians that you wouldn't have access to on your own. So I think all of those experiences can be very valuable, provided that there's a reasonably healthy corporate culture and you're not being worked to death. All the common sense things that you would think apply to any job would apply here as well. But given the choice between the two, if you have opportunities in both directions, there's a lot to be said for being an employee.
What about you, Chase? What's your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, both great points from Vince and Mike already. I feel like I'm that new student that graduated and I'm early in my career freelancing. It seems odd to say, but actually, like, that's kind of the situation. I graduated from the third college that I went to, Cal State Northridge, 2 years ago, and I'm only freelancing full time, no school, no extra stuff, no extra like type of things going on, just doing this. And it's been, but I was also doing this while I was in school, so that's why it seems like I wasn't in there, but I never promoted that I was because there was just a kind of a thing that happens about it. But I actually would suggest, if possible, to try and get a job at a studio first, unless you study business in college. And that's something that don't teach you. And I'm realizing this, like I said, I'm out of college 2018, and I'm realizing I'm learning on my own every single day, and I'm getting better, but I'm still self-taught from everything from game audio to the business side of it. But if you were at a studio, you're learning the pipeline, you're learning the workflow, you're learning the ins and outs, you're building a network, of people that trust and like your work and that you're involved in. If you can get into that and absorb all that knowledge, that extra on experience knowledge, that's what they taught us, at least at audio engineering school 10 years ago, you're going to be able to, if you decide to go freelance, take some of that with you rather than struggle and try to figure out if you perform or move to this bigger city and do all these other things. It's just a lot less stress of things going on versus, because when you're freelancing, you're doing it all every day, all the time, versus like just going into work, doing what you got to do, having a good time, killing it, and then going home and having a nice drink or enjoying some time with your family or whatever you decide to do in your free time. That's just my take on it. I still like the freelance life, but I highly suggest that, unless, like I said, if you know your business, if you know everything about that, I would just kind of go that route. That's what I would prefer if it was a little bit different.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think from my perspective, I agree 100% with what you said, Chase. I think it depends if you have prior experience being a freelancer in some other industry or running a small business or maybe working in a company in another industry or something like that, then starting off as a freelancer in game audio, sure. Basically, if you have the luxury of the choice, and the reality is that unfortunately not that many people have that luxury of a choice. And you graduate, okay, what do I do? Well, should I become a freelancer or should I apply for jobs? Of course, you just do whatever you can when you graduate. You don't stop there and sort of standing at this Y junction of being only able to choose one or the other. But as you said, exactly as you said, Chase, I mean, being a freelancer is one part of it, obviously, is the actual technical production work of what we do. And there's this massive other part of basically running a small business. And if you don't know anything about that, then it's going to be really, really challenging. And that they play off each other. If you join a company, just as you said, Chase, you learn so much about running businesses. Then also, if you are a freelancer and then you join a company, that's really good as well, because you understand the concerns of a company from a business point of view, not just, here I am, I'm doing my work, where's my salary? It's like, well, wait a moment, where is my salary coming from? And how can I assist that objective that the company has? When you see it from the point of view of a freelancer, you see a much bigger picture than just your desk, your job, and your salary. So ideally, it's best to do both, I think. But the order that they come in, I don't know that many people have the luxury of selecting that. But I guess my advice would be that if you don't have the experience of running a small business or being a freelancer at all, then if you had to choose one or the other, then probably I would choose applying for a job in a company first, and then later on in the career, moving on to freelance work, perhaps. So I guess it kind of ties into the next question. Do you recommend any online sources to look at, templates, examples, etc., of contract documents for sound designers and voice actors in the game industry? Mike, have you found any sort of useful online sources for templates of contracts and things like that for people in the game audio industry?
I love how when somebody specifically asks about sound design, you ask the composer. You mean in terms of documents you'd use with subcontractors, or do you mean documents that you yourself would use?
No, I'm sure this is, they said sound designers in the question, but I'm sure it basically means, in general, game audio freelance people, if you've got the opportunity to work for somebody and it's like, right, well, send me a draft of your contract and we'll move on from there. And it's like, oh, geez, I need to write a contract, but I have no idea where to start. I guess that's the kind of example that they're talking about.
Yeah, I would ask a colleague, and you should always be maintaining a network of colleagues, fellow composers, sound designers, et cetera, for questions like this. Just find someone who's a little more experienced and successful than you and say, can you just delete the specifics from one of your contracts and anything that you think is really your secret sauce, and just, can I plagiarize that and put in my details? I personally have rolled my own contracts forever because I in a fit of weird insight, I took a law class in junior high school. No, it was high school. And for some reason, it taught us just enough about contract law for me to figure out how to write my own contracts. And I've refined it over the years, but I've basically, whenever somebody says, send me your standard contract, I've got the same old document I've always used, and I plug in new specifics. One supplementary answer is, I think like the SCL or maybe Gang have some templates for members. Chase seems to have some insight here, so I'm going to hand the baton over to him.
Number one, The Complete Guide to Game Audio by Aaron Marks has some template contracts in there that was written in the book, but then it came with a CD. So you can I don't know, CD might be a link or something to a website link server. That's number one. Number two, Hexany Audio offers free, like, looking at contracts. If you ping them on the Facebook thing of business skills for composers, either Richard or E-Man will plug you with one of those links that will have recommendations of how those are kind of stemmed out. Number three, the Game Attorney Discord is exactly as suggests, has some lawyers in it, and it was recommended to me by a game developer friend. And so you can probably ask some questions in there, make some friends, and other like GDC type of gatherings. I run into like lawyers somehow and made friends, and that lawyer ends up making a draft for me maybe down the line of some other kind of work if you can't do it yourself. But those are the top three I want to suggest for at least referencing and looking at stuff, that just to kind of get started. And that's it.
Amazing. It might be good if you could post some links to those things in the Twitch and the YouTube channels,
Sure.
Chase.
Sure.
Let's roll on to the last question, which is a nice summary as a nice closing question. As a student graduating this year, what advice would you give to someone post-graduation? Wow. Vince, take it away. What advice?
Once you finish at whatever educational institution you're at, you are not done. And that's in all regards, in music, in sound, and in games, because everything really is moving. The games that people are doing right now are actually so different from the games that they're doing 4 years ago. And if you are a game, music, and sound person, you should have an awareness of what it is they're going for. Just some basic things. If you told people about things like Among Us and Fall Guys last year, people would be like, what? Yes, Among Us was actually a game that existed back 2-3 years ago. But, no one really cared too much about it. You can say, okay, it's basically just sort of like a kind of an action-y sort of mafia in space, and it's kind of fun. This isn't really a big thing. No, it's a big thing. People are caring about this. And as a result, people are wanting this type of stuff both not just on a game design perspective, but also in terms of everything else that's happening from an aesthetic and a narrative perspective, the stuff that affects you as animators and artists, and also as sound designers and music composers. And it's going to change again next month because, hey, there's new hardware coming out. And it's going to change even further next year because there's going to be new ways of using that hardware, and people are going to be riffing on them in different ways. I think back to the stuff that I learned in college, and I actually did a master's degree in interactive media with a lot of focus on game design. In addition to the other stuff that was considered part of interactive media at the time, stuff like, exhibit design, interactive design for museums and theme parks and all that. But I got into that program right as a lot of these educational institutions were starting to pay attention to what games are doing. And they really tried their best to stay on the ball with what was going on in the industry. And after I got out, I realized, okay, this is good. There's a lot of good foundation that they gave me, and I'm still on my own at that point. I got to keep on moving because there's so much to learn. The industry is moving forward so fast. And I'm still in a position where I need to keep learning. And it's actually really tough to keep up, honestly. It's kind of nice that I have the work that I do have, but now I'm not spending as much time as I could be paying attention to what's on that little glint on the horizon. There are people that are out there that are going to be seeing things like Genshin Impact right before it actually hits. Or if you're on the more experimental side, seeing something like Ape Out before it actually hits. And that's a really great use of interactive music and sound design in that particular game. And a lot of people are really excited about what that means. Hey, here's another interesting reference point for what interactive and procedural audio and music could be. And so you just got to keep your eyes open, keep your ears open for what is actually going on in this industry. And it's moving at a breakneck pace.
Sage advice. Mike, what would your advice be?
Just to understand the question, they are asking us what we would advise to someone who's just graduating?
Yeah, I guess that's so. If you've just graduated, or if you're coming up to your graduation and you're a bit nervous about what the next steps should be, what kind of advice would you give to somebody in that situation?
Yeah, create 2 tracks in your life. One is artistic. You should be working, creating something. If you're not working on a game, find a volunteer effort to contribute to, create your own library. Just keep the engines of creativity and technique rolling. And the second track ties into what Vince said much more articulately than I'm going to be able to, which is understand what the market is. Look at all the game periodicals, look at reviews of the top games, and know what people are playing and what the audio traditions are in those games. So if you have an opportunity, you are pre-educated in what's expected artistically and technically.
Chase?
Yeah, everyone's saying the same thing. Do your homework. I always say that all the time. I was doing homework when I was in school to be understanding the etiquette of networking and social platforms and what's popular and playing what's, at least getting my hands on at least one of the titles, that's doing well out there. You always got to keep learning. You have to keep growing. And I think when I was in college, this was the question that someone had asked, and I had brought in a guest speaker to tell them what it would kind of be like. Because I was just kind of, I come from a different part of not doing the traditional school, so I had to cut them some slack. But the advice seems to kind of like Vince was saying, is like keep the creativity going, but also still be doing your homework.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add beyond the excellent pieces of advice that the 3 of you have given, other than just a general thing, be humble, be friendly, be active, and enjoy your life. I guess. I think it is easy to lose track of the fact that the game industry is about creating entertainment for people, essentially, and to do that we need to be able to. It's a wonderful kind of marriage of emotion and art and technical proficiency, and all of these things kind of clash together. And it's a privilege really to work for this industry. It's such an unusual, unique industry and the culture that we have in it. And I guess the one thing that especially game audio has impressed me by is just how humble everybody is. You know, everybody's humble, everybody's so supportive, and everybody kind of comes together with this camaraderie that I've not seen in any of the other industries that I've had a chance to work in different fields and different sectors. And that's something that we should be very proud of, and also something that we should actively try to foster and continue in the new members of our industry. So I think stay humble, stay active, and stay curious. But also just remember that, yeah, we're making music and sounds for games, and that is really cool. So have fun too.
Yeah, I think also one more thing that ties into a lot of the things we discussed today is that the last piece of advice is be prepared to experience this as a RPG. This is a very long-term career, and all of you, I'm sure, can definitely attest to that based off of the experiences we've shared. But that's something I've seen in newcomers where they think it's just going to happen overnight. You're going to land the next Journey game or the Among Us or something, and that's it. You hit it big. But it rarely happens that way. And you've got to be prepared to run the marathon because you will get burnt out.
Yeah, one really good expression that one of my previous colleagues used to say, which I thought was brilliant, that I still say often these days, is your best game is your next one.
Or you're as good as your last project.
Yeah, and you can basically apply that to any kind of creative endeavor, that like your best piece of work is going to be your next one. So, you know, don't stress too much about it. Get it out the door, keep moving, you know, because the next one's going to be even better. So, yeah. And that concludes the questions that was in that chat channel from GameSoundCon. So, yeah, thanks everybody for some really excellent views and opinions and pieces of advice on that.
No problem.
Thank you. Pulling them up.
Yeah, we have 12 minutes left now.
Oh man.
Let's talk gear. After all
you mean like the PlayStation
stressful
5?
hard stuff.
The Xbox?
No, not that kind of gear.
Why not that kind of gear? That gear's got audio involved.
I guess I guess it has audio involved. I'm talking about plugins, you know.
I'm trying not to do too many plugins until later this month, just because, I mean, yeah, sales happen all throughout the year, right? But Black Friday typically is when things get a little crazy. And okay, I'll get a little crazy then. But for the most part, I try to keep a safe distance away from the sales that hit my inbox or are on Facebook, all that.
It's really hard to do that when you are subscribed to Plugin Alliance's newsletter, isn't it?
Well, drawing from Vince's wise policy, does anyone have anything they hope is going to go on sale in a few weeks for Black Friday or otherwise?
Transient designer.
Is that SPL Transient Designer?
Yeah.
You could get that right now for $29.95 on Plugin Alliance, Chase.
What? Say no more, Alex. Say no more.
It's like 85% off. Let's not go there.
I gotta admit,
here's a
Plugin Alliance does good stuff. They have one that's not available in the current sale, but it's actually one of their new plugins called Streamliner. And considering all the stuff that happens when delivering to different streaming platforms, that seems like just a tool that I would like. It has a couple of things that overlap with some of the functionality I have in some other plugins, like some of my isotope stuff and other metering type stuff. But that plugin looks really good. It looks really good.
Yeah, the developers Adapter, ADPTR, they were the creators of Magic AB.
Yes.
Is that correct, Mike? It is.
Yes.
It is. Yeah.
And the spiritual successor is, I believe, Metric AB, which is a very similar but more evolved version of the same idea.
Metric AB is absolutely fantastic. Like, it is really good. Like, just like, wow, you would think to put that in like a compare. It's all it does is just basically an easy, convenient way to have reference tracks and just to switch between them. But the other stuff that it does with spectrum analysis, and it's just got everything. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's like that's also on Plugin Alliance, and I bought it as well, and I thought, yeah, well, Magic AB seems to be dead now, so I'll just get this. And that was actually before Mike had informed me that it's actually the same developers. I didn't know that. And it is just fantastic. It's like balancing loudness, balancing frequency. Brilliant.
More and more of my particular mixing and mastering methodology is based on plagiarism. So tools that let you compare your mix to somebody else's mix are increasingly useful for me, because otherwise I feel like I'm stumbling out into the dark and looking for light, whereas this way I see a distant light on the horizon and I can stumble my way towards that. It's just a much easier, it's not a substitute for knowing how to mix or master, but it definitely is a sanity check that's very useful. And given an infinite number of options as to what kind of spectral signature your mix should have, how bright, should you carve something out of the mid-range to make it more smooth and compatible with coexisting sound design, those tools are great. Another one I really like are the various match EQ plugins. You get one for free with Logic, and there's also a great one included in Ozone. And in a similar spirit, those are extremely useful for just keeping you in the right general ballpark.
Yeah, I'm personally not so much a huge fan of any of the automated solutions. I guess I would include Match EQ as a kind of automated solution. But referencing other tracks is so important, especially with we all work in different kinds of environments as far as like the acoustic treatment and the speakers that we work with and the headphones that we use and stuff like that. But if you're referencing other tracks in the similar vein as what you are aiming for, it's a really good sort of fail-safe to make sure that you're not being tricked by your monitoring environment. I will say for sure that actually right now, actually, Vince and I are collaborating on a project which we will be revealing soon. But that actually, that one, we're aiming for a specific sort of late 70s sound from all of the music that we're producing. And the ability to reference like multiple tracks from the era with our own mixes when I've been mastering the stuff that Vince and I have been doing, it's just so useful. How about you, Chase? What's burning a hot hole in your plugin folder right now?
Nothing. I'm actually moving towards a hardware, like mic dream, pretty much. That's what I'm saving up for. We'll see what happens. I forgot about Black Friday this year, so we'll see. I'm very close. I've been selling, like I mentioned on the show a couple, I think episodes ago, was selling a lot of audio gear, old and somewhat new, to kind of save up to just get this one thing. I love this consolidation of all this stuff into just one. So without, teasing, it's a Loudon Audio LA320 microphone. It's about $700. So I got 300 saved. We'll see how it kind of goes.
Nice. Well,
cool.
What, did you test this mic out somewhere else and was like, okay, this is the thing for me, or?
No, I looked at a couple of videos on their site, and they did such a great job doing a type of demonstration with all types of instruments, with vocals, with piano, with Rhodes, with bass, guitar, and then isolating those videos individually so you didn't have to watch a collage of it, and then having different mic positions and hearing it before it's even touched. So you're hearing the raw, but hearing it on a piano, which is something that I'm going to be working on a future album for. I must have this, and I can tell that it's not only just going to be good on the piano, it's going to be good with some vocal ideas I want to work with a singer with after COVID, and such like that dissipates, hopefully, and even some of the saxophone stuff that I'm going to be pulling out very soon. So it's going to be like a multi-purpose mic that I'm just really excited to have, and a good thing to have in the mic locker.
Yeah, it looks like it could do that.
The mic locker. I wish I had a mic locker. This room is my mic locker because I have one. It's right there.
That's what I call my closet.
Yeah. There we go. There we go. Yeah, microphone shopping is something that I've never had the courage to do, because it's like, how do you do that? Like, unless you could borrow it, take it home, record some stuff, and then see how, really kind of explore the potential in your own setup with your own sound sources. Unless you could do that, there must be a certain element that's just a leap of faith. It's like you read all the reviews, and like feasibly, like theoretically, it should be a good choice based on everything that you've read and all the stuff that you listen to on YouTube and website demos and stuff like that. But I don't know that I would have the courage to, especially $700. I mean, that's a proper investment.
Yeah.
But the other good thing on the other side of it is that when you're in that level of hardware quality, you're going to get a fantastic piece of equipment. So it's not like you're buying a reasonably priced microphone that may be sort of very good for some things and really awful for other things. In this case, something like that is going to be a real excellent all-rounder, I'm sure.
Exactly. And the other side of it is that hardware always sells, I've realized. So even if I drop 700, I sell it for 5. I'm 500 away from my TLM103 if I want it. I want to come back in stock. So it's just, I can just get some of those
Taking out
back.
the big guns.
So it's not a big deal.
Fancy German mics. Oh, it's I do think it's worth noting that a lot of these companies do have some sort of program that will allow you to borrow microphones. I don't know about Loudon, but I have actually done either free or relatively cheap rentals of mics. So I was actually able to test out, say, the Earthworks piano mic system, which is expensive. I mean, that's part of it. They need you to be able to confirm for yourself that yes, dropping $3,000 on a set of mics to record a grand piano is a worthwhile purchase. And I called Earthworks up. They said, okay, yeah, talk to this retailer and we'll set you up. And I was actually able to test this thing for free. It was great. In the end, I decided, okay, this is really great. It's not quite worth it for me at this particular time, but I'm really glad that I went through with this process. Earthworks is a great company. I'm going to go back to them again once, finances and home situation and, the actual piano. Let's get that settled. But there are some really cool programs that are out there that aren't necessarily very public from these companies. These companies do have things in place where they want to sell you product. And if you ask them nicely, email, even calling up. I actually did it because I actually called them up because I talked to a representative at NAMM at one point, and I had their business card. All right, let's do this. Let's see what happens. And I was actually able to get a piano mic that I could test.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very, very true. Vintage King comes to mind.
That's
right
it. That's
off the bat
how I did it. I did it through Vintage King.
All right.
And yeah, they're great. And there's other, like Vince was saying, you can rent off of something like other rental sites. People have their equipment up, and you can just maybe in your local area see who has that, and then do a try before you buy. So yeah, it's another opportunity to do that too.
Cool. Look at the time.
It's the game audio 59 minutes.
This is a rare case where we're actually wrapping up on time.
All right. Well, if we're going to wrap up, let's wrap up strong. Quickly, what game are you actually playing right now? Alex, are you playing anything, or are you listening to something really cool?
I am playing Elite Dangerous again. I'm back into Elite Dangerous again.
Of course.
I put down Warframe for a bit, and then here's Elite Dangerous. Yeah. Slowly like a 5-year-old game now, isn't it? 4 or 5-year-old. It's fantastic. Anyway, that's me. Chase.
I'm playing Aztec Ride.
Oh, yes. You've been talking about that game a lot on Instagram, and it looks cool. And I got to admit, like Aztec Ride, as cool as the game looks, I'm really struck by how nicely that imagery that you've created on your Instagram is. It's like I have a very strong image of you playing along with Aztec Ride actually kind of running in a screen on the background while you're recording this. It's like, You know, I think you were selling yourself a little short when you were talking about your Instagram game back there.
Humble for the rumble, Vince. I appreciate it.
Mike?
Still on Ghost of Tsushima, there's just endless gameplay in that. Though I, of course, by nature tend to fall back on games of Civ 5 from time to time, just because that's my spiritual home base as a gamer.
Cool.
And
Oh,
Vince,
yeah.
I think you're the only one who hasn't answered.
Well, I've been messing around with a couple of things on my Oculus. Yeah, I did get that Oculus Quest 2. And I've been playing some older games on it, but they're old favorites. In this case, Tetris Effect and Res Infinite. Those are just
Res.
beautiful looking and sounding games. And doing it in VR, especially on a nice, comfortable headset, is pretty cool.
Yeah, Res Infinite is pretty great.
All right.
Res.
So, I mean, with that done, I think it's safe to take us out. Thank you to everyone watching on YouTube and Twitch, because this has been another episode of the Game Audio Hour. You can go ahead and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, like us, watch those spaces, because that is where we will announce the show. And assuming things go according to schedule, 2 weeks from now, we will see you for yet another episode of the Game Audio Hour. And until then,
Sorry.
bye.